I'm Kat.
I'm Rachel.
We are the Pandemonium.
All right. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
It's been probably
Being a little risque there.
no. I went to my anatomy screening today, and she also checked some stuff out today. So
I love that.
yeah, she was very nice. We were listening to 60s music,
Nice.
so it was right up my alley. I'm gonna let our listeners know about my beef with American Airlines.
Right.
I bought a ticket for this year. Well, last year, and then couldn't use it because I got pregnant, and then I lost that baby, and then got pregnant again, lost that baby. It happened a few times. It's okay, it happened. But what sucks is I contacted American Airlines to be like, hey, I need to get an extension on this because I'm pregnant again. We're not about to lose a baby to go on a trip. Because if y'all want to buy me a gift, you can buy me Disney gift cards because we're hoping to go to Disney World for the first time after little Brisket is born. Um, but finally sent it through an escalations team, and they denied it because they were saying that my medical necessities weren't extreme enough. Loss of life was not extreme enough to cause a refund. So I cried for a good solid 30 minutes today. It's fine. The woman I spoke to last time, which was Jeanette, was very nice. And then today, Olga, who was very nice as well. But American Airlines can just go fork themselves.
I have some choice words for them, and none of them I can say right now.
Because we're under the 10-minute mark.
Exactly.
So, and I know you guys see me using string right here. I am currently working on Dr. Sister's husband's Christmas stocking. That is so cute, if I might add. If AJ is watching, I did ask, and she said he has not watched. But if he is, you best turn away from the camera right now because I have made some work on it. Mind you, we're recording this a lot ahead of schedule, but we're trying. God damn it.
Ma'am, we're not 10 minutes in yet.
It's GAWDAMMIT. So it's not what you think it is. I've made some pretty good progress on this. So I screwed up because I forgot one part, but this thing has two polar bears that I'm going to eventually sew on it. But right now I'm working on the coat, which this has taken me 6 hours. Yesterday and today. So I'm just going to keep working on it.
I mean, it's a lot of beating, so.
It is a lot of beating. It's a lot. But what is more is this part, which I love this part. It's so sparkly. It's a little blurry, but
I love it.
it's got dark purple and green hollow up at the top, and then a light purple and a light sort of sagey green, and then like a light blue, and then a Tiffany blue. And then I put little pearls because my mom gave me pearls to do one of the stockings, little fake pearls, And she's like, you can keep it. What am I going to do with 3,000 pearls, Rachel? I'm going to use them for stuff like this. So
I was about to say, you have found their use, so
Just goes in the stocking kit. How about you? How are you doing?
when we're recording this, I had the week off of work because it was use it or lose it vacation time, which is complete another bull
Bullshit.
hockey. And because too many people were rolling their weeks over and taking months off at a time, so can't do that. Um, Finally got around and got my flu shot. Doctor sister was very pissy with me about it. Apparently, I couldn't get my Tdap because you can only get it every 10 years. And they, for some reason, had it in my records that I got it in 2021, which I don't recall. I remember getting it in 2017. Not so much 2021, but okay.
I remember you getting it in 2021. You had posted it in the group. You were cleaning out something. I think it was Mimi's house. And you had stepped on something in the backyard. Or was that Emily?
For that, I
That
think
may
that
have
was
been
Emily.
Emily. Yeah.
Yeah, no. I don't remember getting it in 2021, but I mean, if the pharmacy records say that I got it in 2021, then I'm going to have to go off of that because I don't remember. So, either way, I'm supposedly good. And for a bunch more years until 2031. So, but yeah, no, just been puttering around the house, doing stuff, sleeping a lot. My body's like, oh, great, we can catch up on all the sleep. So, been doing that on top of just doing stuff around the house that I had kind of kept putting off until uh, now, pretty much.
I think we switched sleep schedules yesterday because I stayed up until 9:30, 10 o'clock when I normally go to bed at 8, 8:30, and you went to bed at 8, 8:30.
Well, your husband also was home super late, so you don't like to go to bed until he gets home.
Which sucks for our 24-hour shifts because I'll be on the phone with Rachel until I do the 3 big YWN INGs. Because if I say the word, I'm going to do the thing. And I'm not going to take a nap right now. But I remember one night I was on the phone with her until like 11:30, and you were like, ma'am, you need to go to bed. And I was like, I'm not asleep. And she's like, have you taken your melatonin? Speaking of which, have you taken your meds?
Yes. Have you taken your meds?
Yes, I took them at 6 a.m.
Okay.
And I remember going, oh, shoot. And I had to run to the bathroom and take my melatonin because if I don't take the melatonin, I don't fall asleep until maybe like midnight, 1 o'clock. And it's funny because he's like, I don't believe you. So I took my nighttime meds. Did not take any melatonin. I didn't fall asleep until 2.
Because our body does not produce enough melatonin to make us go sleepies.
Which my doctor was like, there's no way that happens. And I said, it is. It's a triggered traumatic response because my ex used to traumatize me in my sleep. So now my body does not actually regulate and maintain or make enough melatonin for me to actually sleep through the night.
Mine makes barely enough, but not enough for me to get the deep REM sleep. It's the very light sleep. And so I take some ashwagandha and some medicine that's called over the counter that's called Sleep 3, which has melatonin and like 2 other things in it, so that way it gets you to sleep and keeps you asleep. It's like extended release, so it's nice. And yeah, it between the two of them, they knock me out and keep me asleep, and I get very restless sleep now.
That she does. Sometimes I have to call her and wake her up and be like, hello, this is your 9:25 wake up call. Get your ass out of bed.
The last couple of times she had to do that, I was actually already awake. I was just laying in bed going, I want to get up. I would much rather just go back to sleep. Phone in hand, just kind of looking at all the notifications that happened while I was asleep. Then you call and I'm like, all right, yeah, no, I need to get up now.
So for those of you who are wondering, I'm doing a Buchella stocking kit. These individual pieces I cut out and I put them in baggies that are labeled with like the numbers of the area. This will take me today's episode and probably another hour or two. So, and then it'll be lunchtime. I got to figure out what I'm doing for lunch. I don't have leftovers.
Grilled cheese?
Don't have any bread. Bread sold out.
Nah, that's fair.
Taco Bell.
I mean, there's that too.
It's cheap, it's easy, and I can get a frozen Baja Blast. There we go. Okay, so what do we need a trigger warning?
Yes.
This is a Pandemonium Witches podcast trigger warning. The following episode contains graphic violence and gruesome depictions. Listener discretion is advised.
Okay, so trigger warning applied. So how gruesome? 1 to 5, 5 knives.
Like 4.5, 4 3/4.
So 4 and a butter knife?
Yeah, pretty much. Or just a dull knife.
Have you seen a butter knife? They're dull as shit. It's like not like a regular butter knife that comes in a cutlery set. I'm talking about a legitimate butter knife.
That's fair. I was thinking like the ones that came in the cutlery set. So
I have one in my drawer. Do you want me to go get it? Because it's all round edges.
that's fair.
Like an elongated, flattened spoon.
Actual butter knife that I have is like pointed at the end. It's like pointed and then it's like has like little rounded edges and then it's just flat to the handle.
Mine's just an antique. I got it from Abuela. So
Mine's from Baby, so I mean,
there we go. So what do we have for today?
we have the Black Dahlia.
You know, you're just kicking off season 2 with all of the gruesome stuff.
Because I want to get them out of the way. Duh.
Now remember, we can't say the M word. It's schmurdered. And we can't say the B word. It's pew pew.
So to make sure that I did actually say the words, I did the adjunction that we have to say into my notes. So that way I can read it and say it like we're supposed to.
Listen, look, my goal is to not have this be, because right now we're 18 and over. So my goal is to not have it be 18 and over forever. Like we can still have it be 18 and over and we can still swear on certain episodes, but like.
No, I know.
Okay. I'm not ready, but ooh, do you have your hydration station?
I do. I was about to ask you that.
It's
I
half
have
full, so.
caffeine and lemonade.
Let me go grab a ginger ale.
Okay. You will need it.
Tell them. I already know like the small specifics of the case. I know what the case is about. So let's tell them the TLDR when I go and get my ginger. I'll be right back.
Okay, so the TLDR is Black Dahlia was a nickname given to Elizabeth Short after her murder that happened in January 1947. So right after World War II. Elizabeth was an American woman who was found in Leimert Park neighborhood of Los Angeles, California on January 15th, 1947. Elizabeth's case became highly publicized due to the gruesome nature of her murder, which included the destruction of her body. Elizabeth's unsolved murder and the details surrounding it have had a lasting cultural impact, generating various theories and public speculation, which some of the theories I have included. Her life and death have been the basis of numerous books and films, and her murder is frequently cited as one of the most famous unsolved murders in U.S. history. And to this day, it's still unsolved.
So we talked about this last season about COVID, how you could go visit famous crime scenes. And I talked about this one being the most gruesome one I think I had ever seen. Because you could do 40 Wax. Who's that? Lizzie Borden. You could go to Lizzie Borden's house. You could go to the St. Valentine's Day Massacre. You could do the Ed Gein house. All of those houses, they had 3D walkthrough. And I was like, oh, I'll go look at the Black Dahlia because I've already seen all of these. I didn't sleep for 4 days. Don't go look. Do not go looking, guys. Because we love horror movies. We like watching true crime in the background just for shits and giggles. Do not.
So it's one of the most famous unsolved murders in U.S. history, as well as one of the oldest unsolved cases in Los Angeles County. It has likewise been credited by historians as one of the first major crimes in post-war America to capture national attention, because it was right after World War II. Are you ready to jump in?
Wasn't it like directly after World War II? It was like a year or
1947.
2. Yeah.
January 1947. So yeah, like war ended in 1945. 2 years later, she's found.
Also, I'm glad I'm not doing it today because guess what? Today's garbage pickup. I can hear him. He's 3 houses away. I'm ready.
Okay. We are most definitely ready. So Elizabeth Short was born July 29th, 1924, in the Hyde Park neighborhood of Boston, Massachusetts. She was the third daughter of 5. Her sisters were Virginia Mae West, who was born in 1920 and died in 1985, Dorothea Schloesser. I'm sorry I mispronounced your last name.
Let me see.
Give me one moment. Do-do-do-do-do-do.
I'm really good at pronouncing weird names.
It's the SC and the H and the L. It always gets me.
So it's either Dutch or German, but it's Schlosser.
Schlosser. Okay, thanks.
No problem. Glad I could help.
Who was born in 1922 and passed away in 2012. So she was old when she passed. Almost, she was 90. Eleonora Chalmers, 1925 to 2022. And Muriel Short, 1929 to 2023. So her 2 of her sisters, her 2 younger sisters, lived until just recently.
Right. That's some darn good genetics.
Oh, yeah. So Elizabeth's parents were Cleo Alvin Short, who was born October 18th, 1885, and passed away January 19th, 1967, and Phoebe May Sawyer, July 2nd, 1897 to March 1st, 1992. Cleo was a United States Navy sailor from Gloucester Courthouse, Virginia, and Phoebe was from Millbridge, Maine. They were married in Portland, Maine in 1918. The family relocated to Portland, Maine in 1927 before setting roots down in Medford, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, later on in 1927. Cleo built many golf courses until he lost most of his savings in the 1929 stock market crash. In 1930, his car was found abandoned on the Charleston Bridge, and it was presumed that he had jumped into the Charles River. Stay tuned for an update on that in a few moments.
Okay.
Phoebe believed that her husband had died, and so she began to work as a bookkeeper to support herself and her daughters. Elizabeth was troubled by bronchitis and severe asthma attacks throughout her childhood, and because of that, she underwent a lung surgery at the age of 15. Afterwards, her doctor suggested that she routinely go to a milder climate to prevent further respiratory problems, because up north, the cold winters and everything. So her mom started sending her down to family friends in Miami during the winters for the next 3 years. So that way it was easier for her to breathe. Elizabeth ended up dropping out of Medford High School during her sophomore year. So, update on her dad. So, late 1942, so 12 years have gone by at this point. Phoebe received a letter from Cleo in which he revealed that he was alive and had moved to California and had started a whole new life. And in parentheses, I went, that pig.
You know, Sylvia and I were just talking about this the other day, the suitcase killer, because I finally watched that made for TV on Netflix. How do guys do that? Where they can just have all these multiple flings and families and all this crud. Josh doesn't even have enough time for me, but then again, I have 27 different personalities. So, not literally, I'm not schizophrenic, but I have different moods. And
Well, I mean, okay, so back then it was easier for men to just kind of basically be polygamous because technology wasn't as advanced as it is today. People, you can't like easily run background checks, cameras, social media, all of it. And also things were a lot cheaper back then. So they could easily support 2 different families on the same income. And the fact that, he could literally up and moved to the other side of the country and start a whole new life, get married again, all of it. Because nobody was checking to see marriage certificates, death certificates, any of that, because it took so long and people could just easily disappear again.
Throw the whole man in the bin. Just throw it in the bin, light it on fire. We're done.
So in December of 1942, Elizabeth decided to move to Vallejo, California to live with her father.
I'm sorry, what, California?
You're going to make fun of me.
Vallejo.
Whatever. So
Not
Elizabeth
making fun of you. It's cute. It's adorable. Vallejo. I'm gonna tell my cousin, guess what? You live in a fancier place now. It's not the armpit of California. No. It's Vallejo.
Listen, I remember that the double L makes a Y sound, okay?
But the J-O is a ho. Just remember, it's the ho of the valley. Vallejo.
Okay, I'll remember that. So, Elizabeth hadn't seen her father since she was 6, and she was now 18. And Cleo was working at the nearby Mayer Island Naval Shipyard on San Francisco Bay. Elizabeth and her father started arguing, and she moved out in January 1943. So, wasn't even there a full month.
Like a blip.
Pretty much. Elizabeth started working at the Base Exchange at Camp Cook, which is now known as Vandenberg Space Force Base, near Lompoc, California. Did I pronounce that one right?
Yes, you did. I'm so proud.
She briefly lived with a U.S. Army Air Force sergeant who reportedly abused her, and she left Lompoc in mid-1943, so we're during World War II right now, and moved to Santa Barbara. While there, she was arrested on September 23rd for drinking at a local bar underage.
I can see it happening. Santa Barbara is known for its loosey-goosey, but it was still very like stiff upper neck, I guess you could say. It was still very like Abercrombie and Fitch type of people.
Okay, so the Valley. Got it. So juvenile authorities sent her back to her mother, but she returned to Florida instead, making only occasional visits to her family near Boston. So I had to get some clarification about this because I was like, she was 18. Why were the juvenile authorities involved? Well, little known facts. So the drinking age was set at 21 in some states after Prohibition ended. It was not set nationwide at 21 until 1984. The legal age of adulthood in 1943 was 21 years old, which is why she was sent back home, even though she was at that point 19. And today she would be considered legal adult. The age of legal adulthood did not get lowered to 18 until the 1970s, despite the age of drafting being still 18. So people were getting drafted at 18 for World War II, but they were still considered juveniles. Like, the fuck?
And you also have to remember at this time, it was also legal to get married at the age of 14 without parental consent.
Right. I think it was like 9 if you had your parents sign off on it.
Yeah, it was 9 was the youngest you could get married. And I'm just sitting there because we were doing that one episode last year and I was like, this is disgusting. I think I took like 4 cold showers that day. I was like, ugh.
If we had been possible to take our brain out and sit there and scrub it with a nail file, we would have. Or a nail brush, would have. So instead, Elizabeth went to Florida. I almost said England. Wrong place. So while in Florida, Elizabeth met Major Matthew Michael Gordon Jr. That's a mouthful. Who was a decorated Army Air Force officer of the 2nd Air Commando Group who was training for deployment to the Southeast Asian theater during World War II. Elizabeth would later tell friends that Matthew had written to propose marriage while he was recovering from injuries that he sustained from a plane crash in India. She accepted his offer, but unfortunately Matthew died in a second crash on August 10, 1945. Elizabeth's sister Dorothea also served during the war and was assigned to decode Japanese messages, which was kind of cool. That was a little kind of cool tidbit. I was like, oh, I like that. I would put that in.
Love that.
In July 1946, by this point, after the war, Elizabeth moved to Los Angeles to visit Army Air Force Lieutenant Joseph Gordon Fickling, whom she knew from Florida. Joseph was stationed at the Naval Reserve Air Base in Long Beach, California, and Elizabeth spent the last 6 months of her life in Southern California, mostly in the Los Angeles area. Shortly before her death, she worked as a waitress and rented a room behind the Florentine Gardens nightclub on Hollywood Boulevard. Elizabeth had been variously described and depicted as an aspiring or would-be actress. Because of course, that was the thing. That was the thing to do in Hollywood.
I mean, it still is. You know, I have a couple of friends who moved down there and they're voice actors or just regular actors, and they originally didn't go there for that.
Some would say she did have aspirations to be a film star, but she didn't have any known acting jobs or credits. So she had dreams, but nothing became of them. So January 9th, 1947, Elizabeth returned to her home in Los Angeles. She had been on a brief trip to San Diego with Robert Red Manley. Robert was a 25-year-old married salesman that Elizabeth was dating. He stated he had dropped her off at the Biltmore Hotel in downtown Los Angeles. He also stated that she was supposed to meet one of her sisters who was visiting from Boston. According to some accounts, Biltmore staff recall seeing Elizabeth using the lobby phone, and that shortly after, she was allegedly seen by the Crown Grill Cocktail Lounge patrons, which was located at 754 South Olive Street and was about 3/8 of a mile, 600 meters away from the hotel. And that was the last time she was seen alive.
Okay.
I put in giant caps, trigger warning, this is when it gets graphic and nasty.
That's
This
okay.
part took me several days to get through.
It's true. I can vouch for that because we were supposed to record on Tuesday. And then she couldn't do it. She's like, I just can't. And I said, okay, we'll do it Wednesday. Yesterday, I had the worst headache. I don't get headache. And then today.
So, the morning of January 15th, 1947, Elizabeth's naked body was found. Her body was in two pieces and was discovered in a vacant lot on the west side of South Norton Avenue in the neighborhood of Learmont Park, which was largely undeveloped at the time. Her severely mutilated body was completely severed at the waist and had been drained of blood, which left her skin a very pale white. Medical examiners concluded that she had been deceased for about 10 hours prior to her being found, which left her time of death to be either sometime during the evening of January 14th or the early morning hours of January 15th. She had been washed by her killer before they disposed of her body.
I'm sorry.
Her face...
Hold on. Did you say washed?
Washed.
Okay. I heard correctly. All right.
Yeah, they had bathed her body. Her face had been slashed from each ear down to the corners of her mouth, and this became known as the Glasgow smile, which is also the Batman Joker. The Batman's Joker is where they drew inspiration from that.
Sidebar, because this is very heavy. We need a little light. Joker and Harley Quinn are not the epitome of the perfect lovers. That would be Adams, Gomez, and Morticia. Okay, number one. Number two, Harley Quinn is gay. Okay, she and Poison Ivy have been hitting it off since the 80s. Okay, Joker has nothing on them. Joker is a dude bro. He's a fuck boy. Continue.
He's a frat boy. So the Glasgow smile, we could go into that another time. That's got a long history in and of itself. Elizabeth had several cuts on her thighs and on her breasts, and entire portions of her flesh had been sliced away. The lower half of her body was in a position that was a foot away from her upper half, and her intestines had been tucked neatly beneath her bum. She had been posed with her hands over her head, her elbows bent at right angles, and her legs spread apart. Los Angeles Herald Express reporter Aggie Underwood was among the first to arrive at the crime scene and took several photos of Elizabeth's body and the surroundings. Near Elizabeth, detectives located a heel print on the ground amid the tire tracks, and a cement sack containing watery blood was also found nearby.
My headset keeps getting caught in my armpit. Isn't this one of those cases where, kind of like what we talked about last year, where there was they didn't seal off the crime scene? Like everybody was walking everywhere.
Not that I could find everything, like, because I believe that the reporter that took the photos was one that was contracted out by the police to do crime scene photos, because that was the thing that they did. It wasn't a police it wasn't a thing that they had on call kind of thing. So everything that I could find was that the crime scene was pretty much preserved as much as it could be, but because they don't know when her body got dropped and how long it was there. So once they discovered her, they pretty much kept the crime scene as it was to get what they could.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because the photos that I saw from the 3D, there were far too many photos. So I thought that was from the press, but I guess not.
Well, so the reporter took several photos of everything, and because of that, that's why we have the photos of the crime scene. And so because that person was among the first to arrive, they were able to get the photos where it was as little undisturbed as possible.
Okay, that makes sense. My brain is picking up what you're putting down.
And also, by this point in 47, they were realizing that they need to preserve crime scenes as much as possible by this point. But also, the area that she was found, it was undeveloped, it was muddy and just dirt, so it was kind of hard to figure out what was there previously and what was there when she was found. So they performed an autopsy on Elizabeth, and that was performed on January 16th, 1947 by the Los Angeles County coroner, Frederick Newbar. His report stated that Elizabeth was 5 foot 5 inches, which is 165.1 centimeters or 1.65 meters tall. She weighed about 115 pounds, which was 52 kilograms, had light blue eyes, brown hair, and badly decayed teeth. She also had ligature marks around her ankles, wrist, and neck. She had an irregular laceration with superficial tissue lost on her right breast. Frederick also noted that there was superficial lacerations on her right forearm, upper left arm, and lower left side of her chest. Elizabeth had been cut completely in half by a technique that was taught in the 1930s called a hemocorporectomy.
First of all, perfect pronunciation. Second of all, that is a very, well, at least at that time, that was a very difficult procedure to perform.
So her lower half had been removed by transecting the lumbar spine between the second and third lumbar vertebrae, which severed the intestine at the duodenum, which
Duodenum.
whatever. All right, I get some, I missed some. So for those that don't know,
No, it was a huge fight between me and Josh. I thought it was duodenum because that's what I had been taught in my medical classes. Duodenum. It's duodenum or duodenum, depending on what part of the world you are from. Duodenum is in the United Kingdom, Europe, that area. Here, United States, duodenum. Duodenum.
meh, same thing, different pronunciation. So for those that don't know, that is the first C-section of the intestine that connects to the stomach, to the small intestine. So you have your stomach, and so then you have this little C portion here that then connects into the intestine. I had to look it up because I wanted to make sure that I could accurately describe what it was for our non-medical listeners.
You did a very good job.
Oh, thanks. So Frederick's report noted that there was very little bruising along the incision line, which suggested that it had been performed after her death. Another gaping laceration, which was in his words, which measured 4.4 inches, which is 110 millimeters long, ran longitudinally from the umbilicus to the suprapubic region. Catherine, do you want to explain what that is?
Say it one more time because I was.
So she had a 4.25 inch long laceration that ran longitudinally from the umbilicus to the suprapubic region.
So from her belly button down the pelvic bone.
Right. So the lacerations on each side of her face were measured at 3 inches, which is 75 millimeters on the right side of her face, and 2.5 inches, which is 65 millimeters on the left. So not even. So one side was longer than the other. Her skull was not fractured, but there was bruising noted on the front and right side of her scalp, with a small amount of bleeding and the subarachnoid space on the right side, which is consistent with blows to the head. Are you drawing it out on yourself?
So the subarachnoid would be like roughly right around here, near the ear. I mean, my ears are a little lower than most people's. If you haven't figured that out yet, so it'd be right around here. So the crown is here, right? And it would be like right here.
Basically kind of consistent of somebody sneaking up behind her and hitting her on the back of the head to knock her unconscious. Elizabeth's cause of death was determined to be hemorrhaging from the lacerations to her face and shock from the blows to the head and the face. And this part was rough for me. So I know it's going to be rough for you with your trauma.
I am prepared. I am ready.
Frederick also noticed that Elizabeth's anus was dilated at 1 3/4 inches, 45 millimeters, which suggested that she may have been raped. Samples were taken from her body to test for the presence of sperm, but unfortunately, the results came back negative. Elizabeth was identified after her fingerprints were sent to the FBI, as her prints had been on file after her 1943 arrest, which thankfully they were. Unfortunately, immediately after her identification, a team of reporters from William Randolph Hearst's Los Angeles Examiner contacted her mother, Phoebe Short, in Boston over the phone. Wayne Sutton spoke with Phoebe while city editor Jimmy Richardson and Jim Murray sat next to him, listening to the conversation. Wayne Sutton intentionally deceived Phoebe by telling her that Elizabeth had won a beauty contest. It was only after prying tons of personal information about Elizabeth as much as they could out of Phoebe that the reporters finally told her that Elizabeth had been murdered. Jim Murray would later recount the infamous phone call to journalist Larry Harnish in an interview decades later. Wayne called the mother and asked all these questions and took all these notes, he recalled. I sat there and listened to the poor dear mother telling him about her school day triumphs. I can still see him putting his hand over the mouthpiece of the old-fashioned upright phone and say, now what do I tell her? Richardson screwed up his one good eye and said, now tell her. You son of a bitch, Murray said, imitating Sutton. Murray told Larry in the same interview that he was still appalled and that the incident was sharply etched into his memory. Phoebe initially could not believe that what the reporters had told her. She refused to believe that her daughter had been murdered until she received confirmation from the Los Angeles police through the local police department there.
See, I talked to Samantha about her friend who this kind of stuff pisses me off. Like, I'm not crying because I'm sad. I mean, I'm a little bit sad, but I'm crying because I'm angry.
I know.
Rachel knows. I am very hormonal right now, so everything makes me cry.
It's just a day for crying.
It's a day for crying. I've cried a lot today. Good thing I've had already 2 of these. I worked as a journalist, as a ghostwriter, and I had photos go viral, and this was before internet took off when it did, because we're before Google, I have never. I understand journalistic integrity. I understand sources. I still have sources. I have never done that. I've done some pretty shisty stuff to get stories, which you've heard some of them, but never. And I mean, the families that I've interviewed, which you guys will see the Amy Jo episode. You didn't see the interview yet, but I had to edit that thing within an inch of my life because the mom kept telling people stuff. And I was like, you can't say that. I have to cut that out. And she was being very candid with me. And I was like, listen, this is your time. This is your space. This is your platform. You tell me whatever you need to tell me. But the fact that he did that, it doesn't make me angry at him. It makes me angry at the person who made him do it.
Right. And the fact that they didn't let the police be the first ones to notify her. That's the part that made me so angry, because they literally went, "Oh, she's been identified. Okay, let's go ahead and contact her mother," and then lied to her to get all this information to then turn around and tell her. Like, it should have been an in-person telling to make sure somebody was there with her, that she was sitting down. It should never have gone like they did it.
It shouldn't have. However, what you have to remember is, which we're going to cover the Hearst Castle again because it was such a fun episode. And I think we're going to do haunted places that have, excuse me, that have no schmurders attached to them, because Hearst Castle has no schmurders attached to them. It has some hinky history. He was a terrible man. He ran around behind his wife's back, but he had a media empire. The Planet News from Superman is based off of William Randolph Hearst's newspaper empire.
He had a lot of newspapers.
He did. He was like collecting them like Pokemon.
Thankfully, he did not collect them all, because otherwise a lot of them would have gone bankrupt. But that's another story for another time. So the Los Angeles Examiner then offered to pay for Phoebe's flight and accommodations if she traveled to Los Angeles to help with the police investigation. But that was yet another ploy by the newspaper to keep her away from the police and other reporters to protect its scoop. The Los Angeles Examiner and another Hearst newspaper, the Herald Express, would later sensationalize the case with one Examiner article describing the black tailored suit that Elizabeth was last seen wearing as a tight skirt and a sheer blouse. The media would end up calling her the Black Dahlia and described her as an adventuress who prowled Hollywood boulevards. Other newspaper reports would deem Schmurder as a sex fiend slaying, because they wanted to make it seem like she had it coming and that she deserved it because she was a single woman in Hollywood.
Listen, everybody has seen the museum and everybody has seen the photos. If you haven't, you need to go look at it. And it is the essentially Me Too movement museum on what they were wearing. I was wearing Ugg boots and sweats and an oversized snuggy sweater. You know, those big snuggy sweaters, one of those, and a sweatshirt underneath it. I was fully covered. So I guarantee you that's not the case here.
And a few of them in that museum were wearing diapers or just
Schoolgirl clothes, or one
Yep.
of them was a Boy Scout uniform and a Girl Scout uniform too.
right.
And there was another one that was a nurse's uniform from 66, 67, something like that.
Because it doesn't matter what you're wearing. You don't deserve that.
This is why we choose the bear, because we know either way. Either they know that we're human. And it was put beautifully the other day when I was watching a TV show, NCIS. We know what bears are capable of. We do not know what humankind is capable of.
Exactly. And if our with choosing the bear, we know that we go to feed another living being. With mankind, we don't, because we're not even safe in death, as it has been proven by disruption of corpses. Anyways, back on the case. So, January 21st, 1947, a person, we don't know who, we don't even know if it was male or female, but they were claiming to be Elizabeth's killer, placed a call to the office of James Richardson, who was the editor of the Los Angeles Examiner, congratulating James on the coverage of the case. The caller stated to James that he planned to eventually turn himself in, but not before allowing the police to pursue him further. The caller also told James to expect some souvenirs of Beth Short in the mail. 3 days later, a manila envelope was discovered. It was addressed to the Los Angeles Examiner and other Los Angeles papers, with each word having been cut and pasted from newspaper clippings. A large message on the face of the envelope read, "Here is Dahlia's belongings. Letter to follow." The envelope contained Elizabeth's birth certificate, business cards, photographs, and names written on pieces of paper, along with an address book with the name Mark Hansen embossed on the cover.
I'm listening. I just dropped a needle and I don't want to step on it.
It's okay. Yeah, please don't step on that. The packet had been carefully cleaned with gasoline, similar to Elizabeth's body, which led police to suspect the packet had been sent directly by her killer. Because when the killer had washed her body, he'd washed it in gasoline to prevent any DNA, I guess, to be left on it.
I mean, it's true. It does degrade DNA. It also degrades like fibers and a couple of other things too. So does turpentine.
So despite efforts to clean the packet, several partial fingerprints were lifted from the envelope and sent to the FBI for testing. However, the prints were compromised in transit and thus could not be properly analyzed.
I hate you with your howevers. I don't hate you.
I know. The same day the packet was received by the Examiner, a handbag and a black suede shoe was reported to have been seen on top of a garage can in an alley that was a short distance from Norton Avenue, which is 2 miles, 3 kilometers from the crime scene. The items were recovered by police, but had also been wiped clean with gasoline, thus destroying any fingerprints. 2 months later, now on March 14th, 1947, an apparent schmooicide note scrawled in pencil on a bit of paper was found tucked in a shoe that was in a pile of men's clothing by the ocean's edge at the foot of Breeze Avenue in Venice. The note read, "To whom it may concern, I have waited for police to capture me for the Black Dahlia killing, but have not. I am too much of a coward to turn myself in, so this is the best way out for me. I couldn't help myself for that or this. Sorry, Mary."
Who's Mary? I'm
No.
sorry. Who the fork is Mary?
The pile of clothing was first seen by a beach caretaker who reported the discovery to lifeguard Captain John Dillon. John immediately reported this to Captain L.E. Christensen of West Los Angeles Police Station. The clothes included a coat and trousers of blue herringbone tweed, a brown and white t-shirt, white jockey shorts, which is underwear, tan socks, and tan moccasin leisure shoes, size about 8. The clothes gave no clue about the identity of their owner. So back to the address book that was found, or that was sent in. Police quickly deemed that Mark Henson, who was the owner of the address book, as a suspect. Mark was a wealthy local nightclub and theater owner and was an acquaintance whose home Elizabeth had stayed with friends. According to some sources, Mark also confirmed that the purse and the shoe discovered in the alleyway were also Elizabeth's. Anne Toth, Elizabeth's friend and roommate, told investigators that Elizabeth had recently rejected sexual advances from Mark and suggested it as a potential motive for him to kill her. However, Mark was cleared of suspicion in the case. Kind of sounds like Anne was a little jealous, but that's just me. In addition to Mark, the Los Angeles Police Department interviewed over 150 men in the ensuing weeks who they believed to be potential suspects. Robert Manley, who had been one of the last people to see Elizabeth, was also investigated, but was cleared of suspicion after passing numerous polygraph examinations.
What? You can pass the polygraph and be lying the whole time.
And considering that probably most of the men she interacted with were previous service members, they knew how to keep cool under stressful situations. So, of course, they could pass polygraphs. Because that's the whole thing. You have to keep cool, calm, and collected. Not that I know anything about passing polygraphs. Just saying. Have to throw that in there.
I only know about it because my friend, the Russian I used to hang out with in college, she was like, yes, you can paste the polygraph if you just stick this in your shoe. If you are instantly uncomfortable the whole time, they'll have a good baseline. And I was like, why do I need to know this? She goes, you don't. And then walked away. And I was like, I don't. So mysterious.
File it away with the useful, but I don't know what to do with this information in the back of the head.
Well, and I asked a friend of mine, and I was like, is this true? And she's like, yeah, unfortunately, that's true. And she goes, why do you know about that? And I was like, this friend I knew in college. I have no contact with her at all.
Don't worry about it.
Right. I have no contact at all with her anymore, but it's one of those things where it's like, the more you know, shooting stuff.
So, police also interviewed several persons that were found listed in the address book, including Martin Lewis, who had been an acquaintance of Elizabeth's. Martin was able to provide an alibi for the date of Elizabeth's murder, as he was in Portland, Oregon, visiting his dying father-in-law. So, he had a legit alibi. A total of 750 investigators from the Los Angeles Police Department and other departments worked on Elizabeth's case during its initial stages, including 400 sheriff's deputies and 250 California State Patrol officers. That might be why the photos that you saw, it was always so many people, because they had a lot of people working on her case. Various locations were searched for potential evidence, including storm drains throughout Los Angeles, abandoned structures, and various sites along the Los Angeles River, but the searches yielded no further evidence. The Los Angeles City Councilman Lloyd G. Davis posted a $10,000, which is equivalent to $140,820 in 2024, reward for information leading police to Elizabeth's murder, or Elizabeth's killer. After the announcement of the reward, various persons came forward with confessions, most of which the police dismissed as false. Several of the false confessors were charged with obstruction of justice.
Good.
January 26th, so at this point, we are 1948, so a year has gone by at this point. Another letter was received by the examiner, this time handwritten, which read, "Here it is, turning in Wednesday, January 29th, 10 a.m. Had my fun at police. Black Dahlia Avenger." The letter also named a location at which the supposed killer would turn himself in. Police waited at the location on the morning of January 29th, but the alleged killer did not appear. Instead, at 1 p.m., the examiner's office received another cut and pasted letter which read, "Have changed my mind. You would not give me a square deal. Dahlia killing was justified."
There are quite a few things I want to say, but I'm going to avoid it.
I know. The graphic nature of this murder and the subsequent letters received by the examiner had resulted in a media circus surrounding her death. Both local and national publications heavily covered the story, many of which reprinted sensationalist reports suggesting that Elizabeth had been tortured for hours prior to her death. This information was false, yet police allowed the reports to circulate so as to conceal Elizabeth's true cause of death, cerebral hemorrhage, from the public. So instead, they let everybody believe that it was even worse. I mean, I get it was an active case and that they were trying to sort out, because if people would come forward and be like, "Oh, well, I know this about it," and they're like, "Yeah, because it was printed," but you don't know the intimate details, it makes sense. Further reports about Elizabeth's personal life was also publicized, including details about her alleged declining of Mark Henson's sexual advances. Additionally, a stripper who was an acquaintance of Elizabeth's told police that she liked to get guys worked up over her, but she'd leave them hanging dry. This led some reporters, namely the Herald Express's Bevo Means, and detectives to look into the possibility that Elizabeth was a lesbian and began questioning employees and patrons of gay bars in Los Angeles. This claim, however, remained unsubstantiated. Substantiated. I can't read.
Unsubstantiated. You got it right the second time.
Thank you. The Herald Express also received several letters from the supposed killer, again made with cut and pasted clippings, one of which read, "I will give up on the Dahlia killing if I get 10 years. Don't try to find me." February 11th, 1947, the Los Angeles Daily News reported that the case had run into a stone wall with no new leads for investigators to pursue. I think that meant 1948. Because there's no way that just a couple weeks after her murder that they hit a stone wall. The Examiner continued to run stories on the murder and the investigation, which was front page news for 35 days following the discovery of her body. When interviewed, lead investigator Captain Jack Donahue told the press that he believed Elizabeth's murder had taken place in a remote building or a shack on the outskirts of Los Angeles, and that her body had been transported to the location where it was disposed of. I mean, that makes sense, because you would be able to tell surrounding where her body was dumped if it had happened there or not.
Well, also because the photos didn't show for how much blood loss she had. From what I saw from the crime scene, the 3D crime scene walkthrough, there wasn't enough blood there, because your body contains, the baby's going to come out knowing 8 languages, because I don't remember how many pints, but I remember it's a boatload. And for that many,
I want to say it's like 5 liters, 3 liters, something like that.
something like something like that. The shoes I used to have, you remember those black boots that I used to have, the really thick soles? They were rated for surgery. So I wore them when I was a surgical tech. And people used to make fun of me because I was wearing these big black boots. And they were, they were rated for blood. They were EMT boots. You wouldn't slip in an emergency room. So I wore them instead of sneakers like everybody else. And they were like, why don't you just wear those? Because they're rated for blood. I won't slip and slide like everybody else. And the photos were, some of them were a little grainy, but you can see blood. It's a different color variant. So like you have your blacks and your grays and, the in-betweens and the whites. It was this weird color of like a gray black in the crime scene photos. You would have been able to see more than what was there if that was the case. That stuff makes me angry. Continue.
Based on the precise cuts and dissection of her body, the police department looked into the possibility that the murderer had been a surgeon, doctor, or someone with medical knowledge. Because who else? Like the technique used was only one taught to medical people. So it only makes sense that they would narrow it to that. Mid-February 1947, the LAPD served a warrant to the University of Southern California Medical School, which was located near the site that she had been discovered, requesting a complete list of the program's students. The university agreed, so long as the students' identities remained private. Background checks were conducted but yielded no results, because of course background checks wouldn't show up anything if they did something just now. By the spring of 1947, Elizabeth's murder had become a cold case, with few new leads. Sergeant Finis Brown was one of the lead detectives on her case. He blamed the press for compromising the investigation through journalists' probing of details and unverified reporting. In September of 1949, a grand jury convened to discuss inadequacies in the police department's homicide unit based on their failure to solve numerous murders, including especially those of women and children in the previous several years, Elizabeth's being one of them. In the aftermath of the grand jury, further investigation was done on Elizabeth's past, with detectives tracing her movements between Massachusetts, California, and Florida, and also interviewed people who knew Elizabeth in Texas and New Orleans. However, the interviews yielded no more useful information. The notoriety of her murder has spurred a large number of confessions over the years, many of which have been deemed as false. During the initial investigation, police received a total of 60 confessions, mostly made by men, because of course they were. Since that time, over 500 people have confessed to this crime, some of whom had not even been born at the time of her death. Like, dude, you weren't even breathing yet. How could you? No. Sergeant John P. St. John, who was an LAPD detective who had worked this case until his retirement, stated, "It is amazing how many people offer up a relative as the killer." Because it would come out of the woodworks on this. Oh, I thought you were going to say something, so I didn't realize you were just picking up another thread. My bad. In 2003, Ralph Asdell, who was one of the original detectives on her case, told the Times that he believed he had interviewed Elizabeth's killer, a man who had been seen with a sedan parked near the crime scene in the early morning hours of January 15th. A neighbor who had been driving by that day stopped to dispose of a bag of lawn clippings in the lot when he saw a parked sedan allegedly with his right rear door open. The driver of the sedan was standing in the lot. His arrival apparently startled the man, who approached his car and peered in the window before returning to the sedan and driving away. The owner of the sedan was followed to a local restaurant where he worked, but was ultimately cleared of suspicion.
You lying. You gotta be lying.
Ma'am, I would not be lying about this. Suspects remaining under discussion by various authors and experts include a doctor named Walter Bailey, proposed by former Times copy editor Larry Harnich, Times publisher Norman Chandler, whom biographer Donald Wolfe claims got Elizabeth pregnant, Leslie Dillon, Joseph A. Dumas, Artie Lane, Mark Hansen, Francis E. Sweeney, Woody Guthrie, Bugsy Sigal, Orson Welles, George Hodel, Hodel's friend Fred Sexton, George Knowlton, Robert Red Manley, Patrick S. O'Reilly, and Jack Anderson Wilson.
Some of those names, I'm sitting here going, what? What? No.
Long list. Although he was never formally charged in the crime, George Hodel came to wider attention after his death when he was accused by his son, LAPD homicide detective Steve Hodel, of killing Elizabeth and committing several additional murders.
No.
Prior to Elizabeth's case, George Hodel was suspected but not charged in the death of his secretary, Ruth Spalding, and was accused of schmaping his own daughter, Tamara, but was acquitted. George fled the country several times and lived in the Philippines until 1950 and 1990. So if he lived in the Philippines until 1950, like, things just didn't quite add up. But additionally, his son Steve has cited that his father's training as a surgeon as circumstantial evidence. So he had the knowledge. In 2003, it was revealed in notes from the 1949 grand jury report that investigators had wiretapped George Hodel's home and obtained recorded conversation of him with an unidentified visitor saying, "Supposing I did kill the Black Dahlia. They couldn't prove it now. They can't talk to my secretary because she's dead. They thought there was something fishy. Anyway, now they may have figured it out. Killed her. Maybe I did kill my secretary." So, like, freaking wiretapped his shit. Got that, and then still nothing came of it. In 1991, Janice Knowlton, who was 10 years old at the time of Elizabeth's death, claimed that she witnessed her father, George, beat Elizabeth to death with a claw hammer in the detached garage of her family's home in Westminster. She also published a book called Daddy Was the Black Dahlia Killer in 1995, in which she made additional claims that her father sexually abused her. The book was condemned as trash by her stepsister, Joanne Emerson, who stated she believed it, but it wasn't reality. I know because I lived with her father for 16 years. Additionally, St. John told the Times that Janice's claims were not consistent with the facts of the case. But also, I just want to go on to add that just because you lived with the father for 16 years doesn't mean it didn't happen. It just didn't happen to you.
That's what I don't like about sometimes deep diving on these cases, is because I'm like, we had a friend of the family who we called uncle. He wasn't really an uncle. Stuff happened to me. Stuff happened to their daughters, his and his wife daughters. And came out later after he died. Daughter called me and apologized. And I was like, nobody believed me anyways. Like, I understand. But they were like, he would never. And I'm just sitting there going, really? Like, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not happening. And that's why a lot of people didn't believe women up until maybe the 80s and the 90s. Still, sometimes today, you meet police officers that still don't believe women. I was lucky enough when I was living in Virginia. Rachel remembers this. When I was dating Joey, the police officer, the first police officer that came up, which was this guy's partner, didn't believe me. And then the other guy showed up and he reached his arm out and I flinched. And that flinch cinched it for him. And I found out he was doing his reports 5 houses away to make sure that I was okay. And he changed from working AM to changing to PM to third shift to make sure that Joey didn't try to break in the house again. And I was like, this whole case has me feeling
All kinds of fucked up.
yeah, that's a good word for that. Let's use that.
Yeah, that's why I needed a couple of days before before we recorded this, and I had to go back through it.
I understand why you wanted to do this one and not have me just record one of mine, is so you can just get it out of the way. I understand. I get it.
That's why I'm doing all the bad ones right now, because that way they're just done and over with it and go back to arsenic.
Save some for later. We still have October.
I know. I'm sure I will come up with something for October.
We do have 2 requests, which came through last year, which I have done the research for, which will be a 2-parter, which is Ted Bundy and another one. However, I have changed his name. We both agreed on this. Rachel and I agreed on this. Screw the person from last season who was like, I don't know who you're talking about because you're giving him a nickname. Then this is not the podcast for you, my friend.
Giving the killers funny ass nicknames help us get through talking about the case.
It helps us cope. Come on. So his name is going to be Tedward Blight. Because I have a picture. I'll take a picture of it and I'll put it on this video of Edward Cullen holding his mouth. I have a Twilight themed bathroom. So that way when you sit down to take a poop, it's Edward Cullen, aka Tedward Blight, staring at you holding his nose. It's hilarious. It's the small things in life.
Okay. So there was a 2017 book called The Black Dahlia, Red Rose by Pugh Eatwell, which focused on Leslie Dillon, a bellhop who was a former mortician's assistant. His associates, Mark Hansen and Jeff Connors, and Sergeant Finis Brown, who was the lead detective, who had links to Hansen and was allegedly corrupt.
Stop it right now.
The author, Eatwell, posits that Elizabeth was murdered because she knew too much about the men's involvement in a scheme for robbing hotels. She further suggests that Elizabeth was killed at the Astor Motel in Los Angeles, where the owners reported finding one of their rooms covered in blood and fecal matter on the morning that her body was found. The Examiner stated in 1949 that the LAPD chief, William A. Wharton, denied that the Astor Motel had anything to do with the case, although its rival newspaper, the Los Angeles Herald, claimed that the murder took place there. Because, of course, the Examiner didn't want to say anything about it because that means that, they might have had something to do with it, to the cover up. So in 2000, Buzz Williams, a retired detective with Long Beach Police Department, wrote an article for the Long Beach Police Department newsletter, The Rap Sheet, on Elizabeth's murder. His father, Richard F. Williams, was a member of the LAPD gangster squad that helped investigate the case.
Okay. We've talked about mobs. We've talked about gangland like Chicago and LA and New York. This, out of all the true crime that we've ever researched, this is the thing I obsess about. Is because they had a whole unit. It was like an underground unit. It's so cool. They even made movies about it.
So, Buzz's father reportedly believed that Dylan was the killer, and that when Dylan returned to his home state of Oklahoma, he was able to avoid extradition to California because his ex-wife, Georgia Stevenson, was second cousins with the Illinois governor, Adlai Stevenson II, who contacted the governor of Oklahoma on Dylan's behalf. Buzz's article claimed that Dylan sued the LAPD for $3 million, which today is $45,216,837.21.
Help me, I'm poor.
But the suit was dropped. Harshnich disputes this, stating that Dylan was cleared by police after an exhaustive investigation and that the district attorney's files positively placed him in San Francisco when Elizabeth was killed. Well, considering we don't know exactly the time frame that Elizabeth, we just have like a rough estimate, he literally could have left San Francisco, showed up at 2 LA, did the deed, dropped her body, went back to San Francisco.
What's the timeline?
So they put her time of death between early evening on the 14th and early morning the 15th.
Couldn't have worked. You've never driven California. I have. Okay. I'm going to let you in on something. I was looking for my mouse. It was all the way on the opposite side of the screen. Okay. So driving in California is a lot like driving in Florida, except it's on crack. Okay. So here we go. All right. So you've driven in Virginia, right? Okay. You drove my car sometimes during that wedding period, right? People drive crazy. Take that. Take Florida man and put him behind the wheel, and you have a typical California driver. Okay? Now, from San Francisco to LA, that's roughly, with traffic, I'm going to say maybe about 12 hours. 12 hours to go there, not back. Okay? And that's if you take the Grapevine, not if you take the back roads. If you take a back roads, you got to add an extra 2 hours because that's the trucking route that everybody takes. But everybody took the Grapevine back then. Now, at that time, the Grapevine was not 4 lanes. It was only 2 lanes. So 2 lanes on one side, 2 lanes on the other. They didn't expand to the 4 lanes until I want to say about the 80s. The reason I know about this is because they make you take a drunk driving course in California, like to know the layout of the history of the highways. At least that's what they did when I was a kid. So going from LA to San Francisco, I don't think he would have been able to do it because he would have had to check in. I don't think there would have been enough time, Rachel.
Okay, so you're also thinking of modern day traffic.
Well, I mean, even back then, there was still a boatload of traffic because they still had, when did Disneyland get populated? The 60s, right? Late 50s? Okay.
Right. So this was 47. And so I just mapped out. It's just over 2-hour drive, San Diego to LA. So it is feasible.
I was thinking Anaheim, not San Diego. I'm so sorry. My apologies. Forget
I was
everything
like,
I said.
I was like, thanks, maps. Okay, right now it's 2 hours and 12 minutes drive time between the two, going from San Diego up to LA. That is 100% feasible.
Yeah.
Even
yeah.
more so back in 47 when things were a lot different. Like at most, just saying, at most 4 hours. He could have done that like real easy. Just saying.
Well, and you have to remember the truck route used to be on the Grapevine before they finished constructing that back freeway. So it was Highway 1 and Highway 5. So Highway 5, parts of it weren't even finished construction because Highway 5 transects Route 66, which is a little further south than San Diego. But 4 hours would have been the right amount, give or take.
So like total time, let's say 8 hours round trip, give or take. Okay, cool. I honestly, I don't know how long it takes to dissect a body or, to kidnap somebody. I don't know. I don't normally do that kind of thing. So I'm just saying it still would have been possible. It's plausible at least. Anyways, so cool. The district attorney's files had placed him in San Francisco when Elizabeth was killed. Okay, cool, whatever. Right. I was doing San Diego. Hold on, let me see San Francisco. We were both doing the right cities.
So San Francisco to what?
LA.
That's what I was saying. LA is Anaheim, Los Angeles.
Okay, it's still 6 hours, 4 minutes right now. That's still fairly doable. Especially like middle of the night driving when there's nobody else on the roads. Oh yeah, it's doable.
Yeah, it's entirely doable.
So Harshness claims that there was no police LAPD cover-up and that Dylan did in fact receive a financial settlement from the city of Los Angeles, but had not produced concrete evidence to prove it. Several crime authors, including police detective Peter Merlo, have suspected a link between Elizabeth Schmurder and the Cleveland Torso murders, which took place in Cleveland, Ohio between 34 and 38. As part of their...
Sorry to interrupt. That is one of the cases that I told you that I thought it was linked to. Josh said it was the other one, which you'll probably discuss here in a minute.
Probably. As part of their investigation into other murders that took place before and after Elizabeth's killing, I don't know why I pluralized that, the original LAPD investigators studied the Torso murders in 1947, but later discounted any connection between the two cases. In 1980, new evidence implicated a former torso murder suspect, Jack Anderson Wilson, was investigated by St. John in relation to Elizabeth's death. He claimed he was close to arresting Wilson and Elizabeth's death, but that Wilson died in a fire on February 4th, 1982. The possible connection to the torso deaths received renewed media attention when it was profiled on the NBC series Unsolved Mysteries in 1992, in which Eliot Ness biographer Oscar Fraley suggested that Eliot knew the identity of the killer responsible for both cases. Unfortunately, Elizabeth's death was not covered on Unsolved Mysteries, even though it came out 40 years after the fact. Yeah, I was like, oh, well, why wasn't this case? Because the people that were alive during her death were still alive when the show came out. They just never covered it. Even with the reboot, they still never covered it.
Even with the reboot on Netflix?
Even with the reboot on Netflix, they never covered her case.
Oh, Unsolved Mysteries. You've lost brownie points, my dude.
Right? Because I was curious. I was like, well, even with the reboot, like, because you still have people that, kids that might have seen something or overheard something, grandkids that uncover things when grandparents pass away, like anything. No, never covered it. Crime authors such as Steve Hodel and William Rasmussen have suggested a link between Elizabeth's death and the 1946 murder and dismemberment of 6-year-old Suzanne Dagnan in Chicago, Illinois. Captain Donahoe, of the LAPD stated publicly that he believed that the Black Dahlia and the lipstick murders in Chicago were likely connected.
They don't have the same motives, though. Or not motives, but like, that's not the right word.
This child would come out being a brain surgeon.
Listen, okay? I'm trying here.
I know. Among the evidence cited is the fact that Elizabeth's body was found on Norton Avenue, 3 blocks west of Dagnan Boulevard, Dagnan being the same last name of Suzanne from Chicago. I think they were grasping at straws. There were also striking similarities between the handwriting on Suzanne's ransom note and that of the Dahlia Black Avenger, because that was the only handwritten note that was sent in. Both texts used a combination of capitals and small letters. The Dagnan note read in part, "Burn this for her safety," which with almost... So B was capitalized, U lowercase, RNT capitalized, HIS lowercase, F capitalized, O lowercase, R capitalized, HE lowercase, RSA capitalized, F lowercase, and then TY capitalized. So like literally like random letters.
What are they? One more time. Let me get my notepad.
I sent it to you. So both notes also contained a similar misshapen letter P and have one word that matched exactly.
Well, it wouldn't be it's not an anagram, it's something else, where you get rid of the letters that don't match. It would be Burn Tifer Sadie. Sounds like a
Right?
really
Like I looked at it like that too. I was like, oh well, maybe like they're trying to spell something out. Now, mm-mm. There's no making sense of those. Convicted serial killer William Hearns, Hearns, I don't care. He was convicted serial killer, who served life in prison for Suzanne's murder. And he was initially arrested at age 17 for breaking into a residence close to that of Suzanne's. And he claimed he was tortured by police, forced to confess, and made a scapegoat for the murder. After being taken from the medical infirmary at the Dixon Correctional Center on February 26, 2012, for health problems, he died at the University of Illinois Medical Center on March 5th, 2012, at the age of 83. So,
of course he
good
did.
riddance. Good riddance, take the trash out. Between 1943 and 1949, over a dozen unsolved murders occurred in Los Angeles, which involved the sexual mutilation of young, attractive women. Authorities suspected at the time that they could have been the work of a single unidentified serial killer, which is possible. In 1949, a Los Angeles County grand jury was tasked with investigating the failure on the part of the law enforcement to solve the cases. As a result, further investigation was done on the homicides, although none of them were solved. On July 27, 1943, the son of a greenskeeper discovered the naked body of 41-year-old Ora Elizabeth Murray lying on the ground near the parking lot of the Fox Hills Golf Course. So at this point, I'm going to go into the other homicides that happened, if that's okay.
Was that around that time?
Yes. It is literally like just before her murder and like right after. Like that's why they think it was all triangulated into a
Together. Yeah.
serial killer. Yeah.
I don't have a
Ora had,
choice. Remember, we talked about this. I am captive. Help. Help.
this is true. So Ora had been severely beaten about her face and body, and the autopsy determined that her cause of death was due to constriction of the larynx by strangulation. She was last seen on July 26, 1943, so 4 years before Elizabeth. She was attending a dance at the Zenda Ballroom in downtown LA with her sister before leaving with an unidentified man. Her murder still remains unsolved.
So that ballroom that you just talked about, that's where women would go and they would have ticket punches and guys could pay to dance. Like it wouldn't be more than just dancing, but they would pay to dance with women.
Right, they would have like a dance card kind of thing.
Yeah. Not anything sexual or anything. It was just dancing.
Well, and especially because this was during World War II, so it probably also helped, with, morale for guys that are getting sent out and everything, have one last dance kind of thing. John Gilmore's 1994 book, Severed, The True Story of the Black Dahlia murder, suggested a possible connection between Elizabeth's murder and that of 20-year-old Georgette Baldorf. At 11 a.m. on October 12th, 1944, so now 3 years, or roughly 3 years before Elizabeth, Georgette's maid and a janitor arrived to clean her apartment in West Hollywood when they found her body face down in her bathtub. It is believed that Georgette was attacked by a man who was waiting inside her apartment for her. John Gilmore suggested that Elizabeth's employment at the Hollywood Canteen, where Georgette also worked as a hostess, could be a potential connection between the two. However, the claim that Elizabeth ever worked at the Hollywood Canteen has been disputed by other sources, such as the retired Times copy editor Larry Harnett, which I don't hold in highest esteem of him, but that's neither here nor there. Regardless, Steve Hodel has still suggested that both women were killed by the same individual, since in both cases the media received notes supposedly from the killer taunting the police and boasting of his skills. The murder of 44-year-old Janine Nettie French on February 10th, 1947, so basically a month after Elizabeth, was also considered by the media and detectives as possibly being related to Elizabeth. Her body was discovered in West Los Angeles on Grandview Boulevard, naked and badly beaten. Written on her stomach in lipstick was what appeared to say, "Fuck you, BD," and the letters TEX below. The Herald Express covered the story heavily and drew comparisons to the Elizabeth murder less than a month prior, submitting the initials BD, standing for Black Dahlia. According to historian John Lewis, however, the scrawling actually read PD, as in the police department. On March 12, 1947, so 2 months after her murder, the nude body of 43-year-old Evelyn Winters was found at 12:10 a.m. in a vacant lot of an abandoned rail yard in Norwalk, California, along the Los Angeles River. Evelyn had been bludgeoned and strangled to death. She was last seen by a male acquaintance, James Joseph Tiernan, who had stated to authorities that he saw her leave the Albany Hotel in Los Angeles at 8 p.m. Dorothy Ella Montgomery, age 36, was found at about 10:30 a.m. in a vacant field on May 4th, so another 2 months, 1947, under a pepper tree in Florence, Graham, California. Dorothy had died due to strangulation and was found naked and beaten. She had been missing since 9:30 p.m. the previous evening, when she had left her home to pick up her daughter at a dance recital. So far, from what I can gather, they believe these women were all related because they were found beaten and naked, and all in the LA area. On May 12th, 1947, so a couple days after Dorothy, the body of 39-year-old Laura Eliza Trelstad was discovered by an oil company patrolman in an oil field on Long Beach Boulevard. Laura had been sexually assaulted, strangled with a belt, and then thrown from a moving vehicle. According to her husband, they had been playing cards the night prior at their home at 2211 Locust Avenue, Long Beach, with friends in the late afternoon. Laura's husband wanted to continue, but she had become bored and left to go to the Crystal Ballroom. She stated, "If the boys can play poker, we girls can go dance." And she was never seen alive again. To me, it kind of sounded like that one, that was entirely her husband. But, that's just me.
Without a shadow of doubt, it was him.
2 months later, July 8th, 1947, the naked body of Rosenda Josephine Mondragon, age 21, so closer in age to Elizabeth, was discovered by a postal clerk in a gutter near Los Angeles City Hall. Rosenda had been strangled by a silk stocking. She was last seen by her estranged husband that morning at 1 a.m. when he had been served by her with divorce papers at his residence. She then left, entering a stranger's car. I also think that was the husband on that one, but that's just me.
That's the first person that should have been assumed.
Right? So fast forward to October 2nd, 1947. Lillian Dominguez, my brain had a blip, age 15, was walking home with her sister and a friend in Santa Monica when a man approached them and proceeded to stab Lillian in the heart with the stiletto blade between her second and third ribs. 1 week later, on October 9th, a note on the back of a business card was left under the door of a furniture store. The message was written in pencil and read, "I killed the Santa Monica girl. I will kill others." That one, I don't see how they paired it with Elizabeth. I think just because it happened within the same year. February 14th, 1948. 42-year-old Gladys Eugenia Kern, a Los Angeles real estate agent, was found stabbed in the back with a hunting knife in a vacant house that she was showing in the Los Feliz district at 4217 Cromwell Avenue. That afternoon, Gladys was last seen with an unidentified man at the counter of a nearby drugstore. The murderer had stolen her appointment book and had cleaned the murder weapon before he left. That one, again, don't know how they tied it to her, except for the fact it happened little over a year. There was a cosmetologist, Louise Margaret Springer, who was found murdered June 13th, 1949. So we're 2 years now. In the backseat of her husband's convertible sedan along a street in south central Los Angeles. She had died from the length of a clothesline that had been knotted, and a stick had been inserted into her. Skipping ahead. There were several more that they said were tied to Elizabeth, but I honestly don't see it. I think it happened all within 2 years, almost 3, that they just kind of lumped them together, and the grand jury tried the LAPD about these women's cases not being solved. There were a lot. Numerous details regarding Elizabeth's personal life and death have been points of public dispute, however. The eager involvement of both the public and press in solving her murder had been credited as factors that complicated the investigation significantly, resulting in a complex, sometimes inconsistent narrative of events. According to Anne Marie DiStefano of the Portland Tribune, many unsubstantiated stories have circulated about Elizabeth over the years. Like, she was a prostitute, she was frigid, she was pregnant, she was a lesbian, and somehow, instead of fading away over time, the legend of the Black Dahlia just keeps getting more convoluted. Harnish had refuted several supposed rumors and popular conceptions about Elizabeth, and also disputed the validity of Gilmore's book Severed, claiming the book is 25% mistakes, 50% fiction. So what's the other 25%? It's got to be facts. He also examined the district attorney's files. He claimed that Steve Hodel had examined some of them pertaining to his father, along with the Times columnist Steve Lopez. And contrary to Edwell's claims, the files show that Dillon was thoroughly investigated and was determined to have been in San Francisco when Elizabeth was killed. Harnish suspected that Edwell either did not find these files or she chose to ignore them. A number of people, none of that knew Elizabeth, contacted police and newspapers claiming to have seen her during her so-called missing week between her January 9th disappearance and the discovery of her body on January 15th. Police and district attorney investigators ruled out each alleged sighting, and in some cases, those interviewed were identifying other women who they had mistaken for Elizabeth. Elizabeth's whereabouts in the days leading up to her murder and the discovery of her body are still unknown. After the discovery of her body, numerous Los Angeles newspapers printed headlines claiming that she had been tortured leading up to her death. This was denied by law enforcement at the time, but they allowed the claims to circulate as to keep her actual cause of death a secret. Like I stated earlier, I just realized I repeated myself. Some sources, such as Oliver Krenix's Crime and Encyclopedia, which was printed in 1993, state that her body was covered in cigarette burns inflicted on her while she was still alive, although there's no indication of this in her official autopsy report, which it would have been. If she had cigarette burns, that would have been included in her report. In Severed, the author states that the coroner who performed the autopsy suggested in conversation that she had been forced to consume poop based on his findings when examining the contents of her stomach. However, this claim has been denied by Harnish and is also not indicated in her official autopsy, although it has been reprinted in several print and online media. Because if that had been in her stomach, it would have been included in the report.
I'm sorry, can we just back up? Because I think I just had a stroke. What? I just want to make sure I heard it correctly.
Supposedly, the coroner said in conversation that she had consumed feces.
See, I thought you said that, but I wasn't in touch. Listen, okay, no, that's not what happened.
Because if that had been in her stomach's contents, it would have been in the report. Because that is a crucial detail. Same thing with if there had been cigarette burns on her body, it would have been in the report. Other popular circulated rumors claimed that the media crafted the name Black Dahlia because Elizabeth adorned her hair with dahlias. According to the FBI's official website, Elizabeth received the first part of this nickname from the press for her rumored perchance for sheer black clothing. Which has, as somebody who loves the color black, that's not how that works. Newspaper reports shortly after the murder also state that Elizabeth received the nickname from staff and patrons at a Long Beach drugstore in the mid-1946 as wordplay on the film The Blue Dahlia, which came out in 1946.
I could see that as more plausible.
Right.
Also, speaking of hair, I've decided for the baby shower, I'm dyeing my hair blue, and I have green hair dye for you, so we're going to dye your hair green. And it's the vegan dye too, so it'll wash out pretty quickly. But you saw the pretty color green that my hair was. It was like a dark, like almost black color, but in the light, it was like green.
I was thinking about doing like the lower part of my hair green again, just the ends.
I'll do it for you. I do for you. I do for you.
I mean, I still got a lot of the green dye here. However, reports by district attorneys investigators state that this nickname was invented by the newspaper reporters covering her murder. My brain keeps seeing it and keeps flipping it.
It's okay. It took me 4 episodes because I was trying to do it last season, trying to move it to Schmurder and unaliving and a few other things. So it's okay.
The Herald Express reporter Bevo Means, who interviewed Elizabeth's acquaintances at the drugstore, was also credited with first using the Black Dahlia nickname, although reporters Underwood and Jack Smith have been alternatively named as its creators. While some sources claim that Elizabeth was referred to or went by the name during her life, others dispute this. Both Gilmore and Harnish agreed that the name originated during her lifetime and was not a creation of the press. Harnish states that it was, in fact, a nickname that she earned from the staff of the drugstore that she frequented, but in Severed, the author names an A.L. Landers as the proprietor of the drugstore, although he does not provide the store's name. Prior to the circulation of the Black Dahlia name, Elizabeth's killing had been dubbed the werewolf murder by the Herald Express because of the brutal nature of the crime. There have been many true crime books that claim that Elizabeth lived in or visited Los Angeles at various times in the mid-1940s, including the book Severed, which claims she worked at the Hollywood Canteen. This is disputed by Harnish, who states that Elizabeth did not, in fact, live in Los Angeles until after the canteen's closing in 1945. Doesn't mean she couldn't have worked there and just lived outside the city, but that's just me.
That's totally true.
Although some of Elizabeth's acquaintances and several commentators described Elizabeth as a call girl during her time in Los Angeles, according to the detective, the contemporaneous grand jury proved that there was no existing evidence that she was ever a call girl. Harnish claims that the rumor regarding Elizabeth's history as one originates from John Gregory Dune's 1977 novel True Confessions, which is based in part on her crime. Another widely circulated rumor, sometimes used to counterclaim that Elizabeth was a call girl, holds that Elizabeth was unable to have sexual intercourse because of a congenital defect which resulted in what is known as infantile genitalia. Los Angeles County District Attorney's files state that the investigators had questioned 3 men with whom Elizabeth had engaged in sex, including a Chicago police officer who was a suspect in the case. FBI files on the case also contain a statement from one of her alleged lovers. Her autopsy itself, which is reprinted in full in Michael Newton's 2009 book, The Encyclopedia of Unsolved Crimes, notes that her uterus was small. However, no other information in the autopsy is provided that would suggest that her reproductive organs were anything other than anatomically normal. The autopsy also states that Elizabeth was not and had never been pregnant, contrary to what had been claimed prior to and following her death. Another rumor that Elizabeth was a lesbian was also circulated, but this rumor began after the reporter Means, I wanted to call him researcher, and that was not correct, was told by the deputy coroner that Elizabeth wasn't having sex with men owing to her allegedly small genitalia. He took this to mean that Elizabeth had sex with women, and that both he and the Herald Express reporter Sid Hughes began fruitlessly investigating gay bars in Los Angeles for further information, which is so much bullshit.
It really is. And just to let you know, while you were reading that, I got a voice note from Josh and he made me laugh. So, of course, I chuckled. I was not chuckling at Rachel, guys. I was not. Listen, my husband makes me laugh at the worst times, one of them being today, where she had the sonogram wand on my hip adductor, which is the muscle right in between the hip bone. I was literally in so much pain. I was crying, and then he started making me laugh. So of course, he's making me laugh, and the hip abductor's going like this. I'm sorry, but yes, no, I completely agree. It is such big cow fertilizer.
I'm almost done, guys. I promise. On February 2nd, 1947, just 2 weeks after Elizabeth's murder, Republican State Assemblyman C. Don Field was prompted by the case to introduce a bill calling for the formation of a sex offender registry. The state of California would end up becoming the first U.S. state to make the registry of sex offenders mandatory. Elizabeth's murder has been described as one of the most brutal and culturally enduring crimes in U.S. history, and Time magazine listed it as one of the most infamous unsolved cases in the world. Her life and death have been the basis of numerous books, television shows, films, both fictional and non-fictional. Among the most famous fictional accounts of her death is James Ellroy's 1987 novel, The Black Dahlia, which, in addition to her murder, explored the larger field of politics, crime, corruption, and paranoia in post-war Los Angeles. According to cultural critic David M. Fine, James Ellroy's novel was adapted into a 2006 film of the same name by director Brian De Palma. Elizabeth was played by actress Mia Kirshner. Both James Ellroy's novel and its film adaptation bear little relation to the facts of the case. Michael Connelly's 2024 novel, The Waiting, has a major subplot involving this case. Elizabeth was portrayed in heavily fictionalized accounts by Lucy Arnaz in the 1975, trying to jump ahead 100 years, television film Who is the Black Dahlia? By Jessica Nelson in season 4, episode 13 of Hunter, and by Mina Suvari in the series American Horror Story in 2011. Featuring Elizabeth in the plot line of the episode Spooky Little Girl, and again in 2019 with Return to Murder House. Elizabeth is interred at the Mountain View Cemetery in Oakland. After her younger sister Eleonora had grown up and married, their mother Phoebe moved to Oakland to be nearer her daughter's grave. She eventually returned to the East Coast in the 1970s, where she lived into her 90s and passed away in 1992. This episode as well. This case took a lot out of me.
I can see that. Also, the memorial where she's interred is the same memorial as the Jonestown Memorial Cemetery. Same cemetery.
I was going to say 2 birds, 1 stone, but that seems a little crass.
Not crash. Crass. But yes, I understand.
Well, I mean, crash too, but
that too. So are we done for today? Are you done abusing me today?
Yes. Quite sure.
So we talked last season about the Zodiac Killer, which Josh has a theory that the Black Dahlia was the Zodiac Killer's original victim. And the person who was responsible for it was this gentleman that, we pulled all that evidence from, who was previously a doctor and all this other stuff. And he was a psychiatrist, and he was just off to loony bin himself. And when I tell you, he made some very valid points, because my husband's one of those people who can predict what's going to happen in a TV show. That's on ADHD and trauma. But he's really good at predicting who the bad guy is. Lately, we've been watching Tracker, which we finished. I was the one who was getting all the bad guys. I was like, no, that's the bad guy. And he's like, what? And then act all surprised. And I was like, are you sure you're not the one giving birth? Because I'm the one getting all these answers right. But he thinks it was the Zodiac Killer. Now, when I did all that research for the Zodiac case, Rachel remembers I tied him to 4 existing cold cases with his motives and modus operandi and everything like that. And I couldn't find, also, I completed this, and I completed half of this, and I completed
Great job.
the small thing that attaches to the stocking. I haven't finished all 4 items, but I finished a good majority of it. This case bothers me. And it's not for the reasons that you're thinking. It bothers me because I personally feel that it was George who actually did it, because he's tied to the disappearances of not just his secretary, but to, I think it was like 6 other women as well, along with one of his butlers that just disappeared. And I was like, because I was doing research for a paper in college, and I was like, let's talk about some of these people. And I was like, what? How could they, in good conscience, let a case like this go as long as it did without being solved?
On one hand, forensics just not what it is today. I'll give them that much. To wrap back to how your husband was saying that it might have been the Zodiac killer. So Zodiac killer was in 68. This happened in 47. So
Right.
20 plus, 20 years. Depending on how old the Zodiac killer was when he did his murders in 68, depends on if he would have been able to do Elizabeth's killing as well.
Because he would have been 17 at the time. I did the math. He would have been roughly around in between 15 to 17, because his date of birth is between 3 or 4 years. I mean, we've seen, through our research, we've seen the youngest cornflake unaliver as young. I think the youngest one we found was 7 or 8, and they were based out of India. And the oldest one was in their 80s or 90s. And they were still unaliving people at that point. So, could be plausible.
But yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's not plausible. I'm just like, and they were still in California. I was just trying to think of, like, for some reason I thought the Zodiac killer had taken place like in the 80s. I don't know why. I don't know why I thought it was the 80s. Maybe because, freaking Unsolved Mysteries episodes, probably. So like, I was just like, oh yeah, no, that's not plausible. And then I look up for when it actually happened. Oh, that was only like 20 years after her murder. Okay, well, depending on how old he was when he did the 68 murders, depends on if it's plausible for him to do the 47. Because, 20 years. Technically 11 or 21 years. So it is 100% plausible. Because, she was 5'5", 115 pounds. So it is plausible, especially if he knocked her out from behind. But then again, he had to be strong enough to be able to drag 115-pound dead weight. So, like, a lot of schematics that go into it. But yes, I agree with you. I do think it was George. Unfortunately, I don't think there will ever be answers to her death. And that sucks, because I think that all murder victims deserve to have their killers brought to justice and their families get answers.
There are a lot of cases out there, especially ones that we've covered and are covering. There's a few this season. Another victim's family has reached out, and they do want us to cover their case. because they were like, we want somebody who's going to respect my sister. And I was like, absolutely. We'll shame the unaliver, but 100% we respect the victim. Unless in which the case is it's like a, child predator, and that's who gets unalive. Listen,
Circumstances may vary.
But I don't know if you guys have noticed the new intro. We're going to wrap this up real quick. The new intro is short. It's 8 seconds. And if you haven't heard it, go back to listen to the beginning of this episode. The first episode of every season is always going to have the same intro. Same.
Or wait till next week's episode when you get surprised with their 8-second intro.
Because I went through and I was like, this is a long intro. Most podcasts don't have more than a 10-second intro. And I was like, well, let me just fart around with it. Let me see what we can do. And I made an 8-second, I think it's an 8.5-second intro. It's not terrible. It's quite good. I think so anyways. It's just very simple. Hope you guys have enjoyed the Serotonin Saturday so far. This is going to be March. This episode comes out in March. I've decided that for the other Serotonin Saturdays episodes, if you want to gossip, if you have some juicy gossip you just want to share, you just want to get it off your chest and you can't tell anyone, we will give you a different name if you so choose, and we will share it here with our lovely feral party possums, and you will live in infamy. And we will just leave it here. Because I'm totally fine with that.
Same. I love some good tea.
As far as anything else going on with us, we are having a baby. Not me and Rachel, obviously. But Rachel is one of the godparents because it takes a village. We're not going to have just one person because I love you, Rachel, but you're not going to have the responsibility of having to take care of our demon spawn if something were to happen to us. Knock
I
on wood.
appreciate that.
You are welcome. I've already talked about it with the other godparents, and this one person, Devin, I've already told her, you get first dibs. Because I know for a fact you can handle it. Her specialty is dealing with autistic children. Hello.
That's fair.
Hello.
And also, then I can still be the spoiling auntie out of all of it.
What else has happened? Trying to think. We have a new follower on YouTube. So thank you for the follow. Thank you for the like and the subscribe. I'm trying to think, and I don't think there's anything else that we have to cover. Let me see. I think Spotify is the same. 108. 108 followers on Spotify. We've had 18 plays. Our new season hasn't even dropped yet, and we've had 18 plays this season. Just in the last week. Our Facebook business page is 72 followers. And our Facebook group page has 111 members. So once we get, I think we said to the Facebook page, the group business page, not the actual group where everybody can post in. I think we talked about that one doing the Tumblr for the 100th person. So tell your friends, friends, scatter it about. But that's it for today. Thank you for traumatizing me yet again. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Still kind of hate you, but I love you.
Rip the Band-Aid off on this one. My bad.
It's fine. But again, as always, stay feral, guys.
Bite the hand.
And we'll see you all next time. Okay, goodbye.
Okay, bye.
Well, party possums, that's today's dose of the Pandemonium. Thanks for listening and watching the ADHD chaos. Review, comment, and don't forget to subscribe. Tune in next week for more continued madness. And as always, stay feral.